Hello, Mitsu here. As everyone knows, my NarVA is my most used RTA. And I also enjoyed away from NarVA. So this time, I'm going to do the unboxing video for NarVA, or either NarVA as the man in the shot says. So it comes with this package, spare bag, and this sticker. So if I recall correctly, the V stands for vacuum, as all RTAs were creating a pressure differential. I only cleaned that when I cleaned other products from Envision modes, which I already recorded the unboxing video. So this time, NarVA. The spare bag doesn't come inside the package, and this package is indeed the same one as the 5th anniversary NarVA. I think it would be nice to have a square package so that the spare bag could also go in. I also received this sticker, very nice. Classic NarMos logo. So if I open up, you will find one tank. So this appears to be a 510 black oat drip tip because there's a slight texture difference between Talon and black oat. I'm very glad about the change since I had a discussion about the Talon material with Narek half a year ago. So let's see how it opens. The screw is really smooth, so if I turn counterclockwise, the juice flow is closed, then I can access the deck. And if you look at the deck, it has the NAR signature machining lines, and I think this airflow resembles glass mini RTA from Steam Crave, so the holes are slightly more separated from each other if you analyze this airflow system together. So I drew the diagram like this. So these are the posts, and this is the airflow hose for airflow hose, and this is the coil. So I think this airflow system intends to let the air from two holes covers the outer part of the coil, while the air from the other two holes covers the coil close to these coil legs. How about the center of the coil where the heat is the most concentrated? So depending on the outer diameter of the coil, some of the air would cover the outer part of the coil, but the other air would cool down the center of the coil. Since the diameter of these two holes is about 4.2 mm, I would like to maintain at least around 3.4 mm for the outer diameter of the coil. So for these wires from 24 to 27 gauge, if I build 3 mm ID coil, so if I actually calculate by the spreadsheet, the result is like this. So this is just a conversion between the gauge and in millimeter. For coil outer diameter, this is the outer diameter depending on 3 mm ID or 2.5 mm ID. I would do 2.5 mm for 24 gauge and 25 gauge or below, and 3 mm ID for 26, 27, 28 gauge or above. Even though I'll try all different settings, this roughly gives an idea for my first build. Since I was testing Bishop and Ripley mouse-to-long tanks with 27 gauge, I would go for 27 gauge 3 mm ID coil and 5 reps for NarVA. In the future, I would also try the diagonal build like this and see how it goes, even though it is not really intended for this tank. Since it is an RTA, it would have been nicer to have a spare tank in the package, as it can always break. I think this is a PCTG tank barrel. Luckily, PCTG material has heat and impact resistance, so basically it doesn't easily break. It's a good thing without any spare barrel. People in NAR modes wanted a glass or borosilicate, but I am very happy that Narek chose a more durable material in the end. For you citrus lovers, this material also has acid resistance, so it should be fine. So if I look at the chamber, wow, it's beautifully machined, and it is a very reduced chamber. So the chamber is domed, and this liquid channel is fairly high inside the chamber. That means the liquid enters from here, and the chamber encloses the whole arc of the coil and cotton. Can you see how much the chamber is reduced? So I think if someone uses a complex coil and lifts the coil more than where the coiling rod sits, like this, I think it would even short out. I'm not sure if you can see, but the airflow holes are open if I turn counterclockwise, and closes if I turn clockwise. So if I lubricate O-ring by VG, and this is very smooth operation. Look at this. If you turn counterclockwise, it opens the deck. Oh no. And if you want to access the deck, just close the juice flow. Boom. Let's see how it works inside the base. So, if you unscrew 2 screws, I think this glove is way too big for me, so I'll just throw it away. So if you look at the inside, there are 2 eyes and a smiley face. So there's a notch that connects to this smiley rail to regulate the incoming air under the coil. So if I just remove this one, wow. And can you see those 5 holes? The center hole connects this part, and this notch follows this rail. So if I assemble once again, and also this is a very thick O-ring. It would actually prevent the liquid from flowing into the 510 like this. Woohoo! It also serves as the insulator between the positive 510 and the negative body. And there's a housing for this big O-ring. You know, I think there's a saying. So NarVA killed 2 birds with 1 stone using this thick O-ring. Good. It seems the positive post is pressed in, so I don't think I need to disassemble the whole part, as the positive post is clearly separated by this insulator. So this base is basically a pressure chamber to manipulate airflow directly, so the intake of the air from this base is fixed and building up pressure and diffusing the accelerated air under the coil. So this sort of system has a clear advantage over these laminar airflow designs for the longevity of the coil and intensity of the taste. With this diffusion of the multi-hole airflow system, I expect that the vape would be very smooth. It's an elegant design. So we had a look at the base, so if I screw these Phillips heads once again. So I chose my custom engraving gnosis. It means knowledge in ancient Greek, but it's also used to mean knowledge of things outside of what we can perceive, transcendental knowledge that can't be put into words, and the experience of transcendence itself, an experience of reality beyond the mundane. I thought it was a good word for me because it seems to be a running theme in what I'm looking for in life as an astrophysicist. The term was suggested by my neuroscientist friend, John. Here's a recording of the reason for his suggestion for this term.
It seems like looking for truth and understanding beyond what we can see is a general theme of your life. It seems like the way that you think is always striving for something like gnosis. So I just thought that it suits you, and if there was a word to describe you, it's a good one.
Thank you very much, John. It's a very meaningful word for me. So these screws are Phillips heads and these screws are flat heads. So there are 2 different kinds of screws. I wonder why. Wow, the screw is very smooth. Can you see? And there's no wiggle at all. There's absolutely no wiggle at all. Very satisfying. This is the moment where you feel you deserve to pay a high price atomizer. So the wall here is machined so that the wire is captured between the screw and the dog, and that looks like a place for placing your coiling rod. This is the liquid channel, but also serves for the coiling rod. Let's have a look. So 2mm go fine, and 2.5mm also works well. I'll say up to 3mm it works well. Since I've been testing mouse-to-long for Bishop, Ripley, and Bishop 3 given by ambition modes, let's test mouse-to-long first, 27 gauge. So, as the screw rotates clockwise as you tighten it, if I pull the coil legs under the screw, the left side in the top screw and the right side in the bottom screw, as I tighten the screw is going to pull away the leg of the coil, so to make the coil leg shorter. So that means I need to wrap my coil clockwise direction. going to make lightly spaced flight wraps, and I'll just unwrap these deformed legs. So what I meant was, if I place my coil here and tighten it as the screw rotates clockwise direction, it pulls away the leg like this further. So if I build counterclockwise coils, the leg would be here, the leg would be here. It would pull the legs actually inwards if I tighten the screw, and deforms the coil, making a bell shape. So it is always a good practice to see which direction is the best to shorten the coil leg, but there is an exception. I purposely built my coil clockwise in my NarVA review, which pull the leg out because I want to have a longer leg to lift the coil. So there's always an exception, but it's a good practice to have the shorter legs most of the time. So if I just screw it, so the coiling is done. So if you look here, I expected the air from two holes close to the post would cool down the outer part of the coil of this 3mm ID coil. Let's see. So here's the cotton I was given for testing for 3mm ID coil. I mostly use TFC for simple round wires, but let's give it a go with this one. If you feel the resistance of the cotton inside the coil, that's good enough. I'll just arrange my cotton a bit. I think the amount of cotton is already quite balanced on both sides of the coil, so I'm just cutting directly without fluffing out around here at the edge of the deck. Another side also at the edge of the deck, and then slightly fluffing it out, the part that was clumped by my scissor, and gently fold it into the pocket. Also the other side. If there's any strand of the cotton that touches the coil, just leave it out, because that would make a very unpleasant taste. Okay, that looks good enough to me. So I'm going to put some DIY custard, vanilla custard, and I'll prime this cotton. Actually, the cotton is fairly short, which is always nice because I like to minimize the proportion of the cotton sand as much as possible. So it's around 0.92 long, and then I put the tank back, turn slightly counterclockwise to secure it. So the juice flow hole is closed, so I can put some liquid in. Hold the barrel, unscrew the top cap. You can actually unscrew by the drip tip. I actually love the fact that it's a very wide space to put the liquid inside the tank, as we all have different kinds of nozzles of our bottles. Something like this, or something like this, or something like this. I know that some people complain about this mechanism. The width only makes it more convenient, I think, unless you're in an unstable position where you're likely to tip it out. And the chimney diameter is 4mm. Let's fill the juice. And whenever you use the tank, you don't want to fill the whole tank because you want to leave some space for air. Otherwise, the juice channel will not allow the juice from the tank to saturate the wicks fast enough, essentially creating a choke point. This should be enough. For example, if I screw the top cap, you do not want to fill the whole tank. Otherwise, it wouldn't create the bubbles effectively. So you want to have some air inside the tank. So if I want to remove it from my build tab, just grab the tank barrel and the top cap together, close the juice flow, and unscrew from the mode. So log into the mode, and then it will open the juice flow directly, then you're ready to vape. So it's very convenient. If I clean some space, so since the coil was around 0.9 ohm, the lowest setting of this Tesla Invader is 3.7 volt, so it'll be roughly around 15 watt. I'm going to set as the tightest airflow. Let's have a vape. Wow, can you hear the silent airflow? And it's pretty tight. If I turn my Integra to 1 millimeter, for NarVA, yeah, it's almost about like 1.1 millimeter draw. It's pretty tight, and starting with roughly 15 watt, it's very warm and quite saturated. I think it's due to the reduced chamber. Also, it's very quiet. If I compare with Bishop, maybe not as quiet as Bishop or Ripley, but it is very, very quiet as well, and it is super smooth. And the flavor is spot on. And if I compare the height difference between other atomizers, I'm not sure how much it holds. I think it is about like 3 millimeter. Let's see.
Right, just measuring that out, that looks to be about 3 milliliters? Milliliters, yeah, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, you just heard the voice of Superstar from the shot. So it is actually 3 milliliter. So if I compare the height, Integra is 4 milliliter. This Ripley is 3.2 milliliter. This Bishop is 2 milliliter. So can you see the height difference? 3.2, 3 milliliter. How about if I compare with 2? So it seems that the height is actually pretty much same as Ripley, but it holds 3 milliliter. If I measure out the dimension, between the base and the top cap, it is about 36.3 millimeter. The bore of the drip tip is around 5.5. Interesting, because the chimney itself was around 4 milliliter. No, 4 millimeter. I'm making the same mistake as my shed boss. Yeah, so it starts from 4 milliliter. No, 4 millimeter, and it widens as it goes up. Interesting. And if I vape once again, open the juice flow control. I think I get more of a lighter flavor from this one. With this DIY custard liquid, I can get all the different kinds of vanilla and sort of the toasted notes than you get with custard, but it feels light in the mouth. It's less fluffy. It's less fluffy because I think it's due to the reduced chamber, but the flavor is also light in a kind of pleasant way. I mean, it doesn't stick to the tongue like Bishop, and it doesn't have a kind of like sick feeling, but I get the full flavor, and I can actually taste all the complexity of the liquid, I think. I mean, it's not a proper wire, but if I do sort of like a restricted direct lung, turning to half like this, allowing more air, it's buttery smooth. I get more of a fluffiness. Now it actually resembles the fluffiness of the atomizer called the... what's this called? Evil Ripper. Yeah, Evil Ripper. In the past, that one had a very unique fluffiness, as if I was vaping silk. Obviously, it's the wrong size of the coil for restricted direct lung, so the intensity is slightly lower than mouse lung. But with the restricted direct lung, it still got that kind of nice warmth to it, and it's very smooth. The machining is amazing. This is so smooth, like a baby bomb. And also, this juice flow control mechanism is so smooth, and the screw of the 510 is super smooth. So this time, if I set it to fully open airflow and increase to 4.2 volt, even though it is the wrong size of the coil, meaning that the heating surface is too small, it's very, very nice. And there's no dry head, there's no oversaturation. There's absolutely nothing that's off about it. So I think for a restricted direct lung, 26 gauge or 25 gauge. I think I wouldn't even need 25 gauge. I would prefer 26 gauge around 20 watt. For mouse to lung, either 27 gauge or 28 gauge seems ideal. For the next build, 26 gauge and 5 reps would be perfect. Because even with the smaller coil, the fully open is still very flavorful. It's kind of a bold statement, but the taste I get from this custard is better than the other similar setup I've ever tried. The other RTAs that I've used so far, such as Integra, Fafias, Bishop, Ripley, and even Antiquity. Having wait more than 10 seconds, there's no dry heat at all. Since I like to draw for a long time, most of the RTAs are not very compatible with my vaping style, but this one just works. And also there's a very slight splattering of juice up through the drip tip onto the tongue, but not in an unpleasant way. So very tiny droplets. And it doesn't get hot. It's comfortably warm. I think since the air channel is open like this, it seems that the heat that has been formed inside dissipates through this air channel. So this also acts like a heatsink, because I really like the vape from Integra, but it gets really hot if I use restricted direct lung. But it doesn't get hot, and if I want to access the bag, you grab the bag, just close the juice flow, and just pops off. And it is very, very saturated. And there's no deformation of cotton, so it doesn't look like it's been rubbing off into the chamber. So there's nothing I can criticize about functioning yet. It does everything very well, and there's no leakage whatsoever, and continuous bubbling as well. And this lip didn't look comfortable at first in my eyes, honestly, because there's a bit of lip going on. But it is actually very comfortable. I think this lip forms a good seal with my lips, so it's a good shape. I think I enjoy with the restricted direct long the most. And I think this would be a very good liquid for this. One of my all-day vapes, Timekeeper. This would definitely capture the creaminess and fluffiness in this liquid. So in future, I will compare my NarVA with this 26 gauge, as the vape feels slightly similar nuance. For my NarVA, I use mostly 24 gauge, so I don't think NarVA would be quite suitable for the coil that I use in my NarVA, because the chamber is much smaller here. The airflow is nice, it restricts nicely, so it's satisfying. The fully open airflow is somewhat similar to the fully open Integra, I think. Fully open airflow is similar to Integra fully open, so it's quite a restricted direct long. When I refilled the tank, there's a slight leakage happening between this barrel and the top cap, as there's a lip down the barrel. If there's a slight lip on the top cap as well, and the step or the barrel, I expect that it would have a more complete seal. But I'll watch it over time, since the O-ring in the top cap would slightly adjust by tightening and loosening over time. As you screw the top cap back, open the juice flow, and ready to vape. It's a very good design. And if it is more wide open, it catches more sweetness into it, as if when I vape NarVA, the tiny droplets stack onto my tongue. Very satisfying. But using NarVA is sometimes a hassle, since the chamber is too small. So I have to continuously squonk, and also the condensation starts to build up inside this airflow channel, which makes the air to be more turbulent over time. And it is quite noisier as well than all other atomizers. But NarVA doesn't have either problem. And though the chamber is very reduced, there's not too much of that kind of droplet, which I find it actually unpleasant sometimes from very reduced chamber atomizers. It tends to make you feel tired of flavors, but there's not much of that thick droplets as well. I'm just impressed. As a friend of Narek, I feel very lucky to be able to try it with my custom engraving. Without you, I wouldn't have had this wonderful vaping experience. Thank you very much.